Welcome to the Lessons from Your Hairstylist podcast, where we uncover and leverage your unique beauty and personal style. I'm your host, Sarah Cruz, a beauty industry educator and hairstylist with 30 years experience. This show is dedicated to providing you with insights and practical advice for living a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled life. Experience that special stylist-client bond right here as we dive into conversations with experts in beauty and wellness. Here, you'll gain valuable tips on personal style and self-care to empower your journey. Join me to unlock the secrets to living beautifully well while elevating your lifestyle, mind, body, and spirit. Your appointment is now, so have a seat and get ready for transformation. Well, hello and welcome to the Lessons from Your Hairstylist podcast. I'm your host and hairstylist friend, Sarah Cruz. I am super excited today to bring on a really good friend of mine. She's a client of mine in the salon. I've known her for quite a few years now. And if you feel like smiling today and you want to be inspired, you just hang out here with us because we're going to have a conversation with Bonnie Brown. She's got so many stories, so many things that she has done in her life, and she keeps it positive. I wanted to have her come on because she's just somebody that it feels so good to be around because of her mindset and the way that she approaches life. It really is something that when you're around her, it's like magnetic. It makes you feel good. You want to raise the bar for yourself. And that's what we're all about here at the podcast is these transformations that we make every day through tiny little actions. And that's the way that Bonnie lives her life. I'm excited for you to meet her. Bonnie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so glad you're here because we have so much fun when we're in the salon together. We always laugh. Sometimes we make videos, we dance, we do silly things, but there have been things about your life that I've always been inspired by. And your story is one that when you started out as a child, you had some difficulty in the things that you had to go through when you were growing up. And I think that the things that you've had to overcome in your life have really influenced the way that you live. And I just think that it's something that's so inspiring to others. So I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about you, your background, and kind of what you're all about, your backstory.
Well, all right. As you said, I knew nothing about podcasts. I'd heard the word, but that was pretty well it. So when you asked me to come on a podcast, I thought, oh, that'll be fine. I'll just get on, talk for 5 minutes and leave. I had no idea there was going to be this big, long, involved thing, and I had to tell my entire life history. So now I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be very interesting. So basically, my early childhood was a great challenge, probably the biggest challenge of my life as I think about it. My mother was schizophrenic when I was born. We spent the first 4 years of my life mostly in an attic setting. When I was 5, we went to live with my aunt for a year, and if my mother was schizophrenic, she was a bit bipolar. So I had lots of odd experiences as a child, but interestingly enough, you have no comparable experience, so you think everybody has the same life you do. So I thought probably every child would go to funeral homes and view dead bodies. And we would do this fairly often, and I would go and look at these, and I was just amazed because I thought, why do we go and see all these people sleeping in boxes with their good clothes on? Why don't they have their pajamas on? I was utterly bewildered by this experience. It never occurred to me that they were dead. I just thought they were sleeping. And I wondered if people came and looked at me while I was sleeping. And so all these experiences, I was trying to make sense of life. And so at age 5, my mother was sent to a mental institution, and that was another whole chapter of my life where I spent at least once a month or twice a month visiting her in an institution in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And it was quite an experience in the 1940s to go into mental hospitals because it was like entering a very strange place. There would be these beautiful big brick buildings, big green doors. You would go up and knock on the door, and somebody would come to the door and we'd slide back 3 locks. and you'd go into chaos, people crying, people laughing, people yelling, people everything. So, but that was my life. And so I spent a lot of time trying to make sense of it all. But as I grew older, I became more aware of what it was like. And so my teen years, I was very troubled and basically shut down a lot of the time. I did a lot of, I guess, I was just very aware that I was different than the other kids. And they talked about being grounded, and I visualized them being tied to a stake in the backyard because at that point my aunt was very elderly and I felt responsible for caring for her. And so, in talking to my friends, when I asked them about what I was like in high school, they said, well, you were always terribly mature. So I did. I grew up really fast. And one of the things that happens when you grow up really fast and you don't have a real childhood is that you end up your whole life being in childhood mode, which is not a bad thing, actually, because you find ways uh, to enjoy life. And when my son was growing up, I relived childhood with him. And we had the best time. In fact, at Christmas time, when we'd be sitting on the floor playing with toys, he'd finally get so exasperated because I kept playing with his toys. He would say, Mother, don't you have to go and fix dinner? He just wanted to get rid of me. So I just had a great time doing that. So I think I had a certain amount of resilience. I did not believe the things I was told. My aunt told me I should never have been born, that I was, I was not attractive, so I would probably be destined at best to be um, a missionary in either China or Africa. So she did not have high expectations for me, but somehow I didn't absorb that as real. I had this attitude. I guess I was kind of defiant. Well, I'll show you, which I think is, probably what saved me. If I had bought into everything that I was told about who I was, I think it would have been a very different life. But I've always had a sense of humor, and I always enjoyed laughing and being with people and doing things. So I made it through high school somewhere or other, went off to college for 4 years, got a degree in elementary education and sociology, and began teaching in an inner city school in Lansing, Michigan. And it was a challenge. It was absolutely a challenge. I remember when I did my student teaching, the first day, a little kid came up and kicked me. And I had no clue what I was supposed to do with this kid who was kicking me. By the time I reached the third week of teaching for sure, I know exactly what to do when some kid comes up and kicks you. You don't just accept that as, oh, well, I guess I'm just a kicking bag here. Then after 4 years there, I decided to go to another school district, but in the meantime, I decided to take a trip to Europe. So I went to Europe for 8 weeks with a friend. We traveled all around in a car that she bought. We had many adventures. It was very exciting, very interesting. We were totally on our own. It was great. When I came back, I thought, well, what do I want to do now? And I thought, I probably should get married, even though my aunt had me convinced I never could get married. So I thought, okay, um, I wonder how I go about doing that. So first I tried the bar scene. That didn't work at all. I was I was with this guy. He was a policeman essentially, and we went back to his apartment, and he kept dancing toward the bedroom, and I kept dancing back to the living room, and I thought, this is not working. This is just not working. So I found this. Um, I found this group at People's Church in Lansing, and they met at night for potluck on Friday night. The men paid money, the ladies brought dishes to pass, which is pretty typical. So I went the first time and I met an Oriental rug salesman that bored me to death. Then I met a man who made bridges in Michigan all over. He was that. And then I met this sweet little farm boy from Tennessee. And he was just the nicest, kind of sweetest. So I liked this guy. And so what happened was I was ready to go back and check again. I never was able to go back because he called me every Wednesday night and wanted me to do something on Friday night. Oh, what a surprise! What a surprise! So we were married the following July, And then,
And that's Charlie.
yeah, that's Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown. Yes, that was Charlie.
Charlie Brown.
Yes. So, we got married. I struggled when we were first married because I'd been left alone so much as a child. And was totally and suddenly I had this man glued to me all the time, and I was really uncomfortable with it. I was looking for every way I could think of. I was taking classes and doing all kinds of things because I wanted a little bit of privacy. We worked it all out. It was fine. But it was a real challenge initially to get the balance between private life and being part of a couple and how that all evolved. My dad was in and out of my life as a child. He came maybe once a month, gave my aunt minimal money for us to live on with my older brother, who was 7 years older. But I never had a real relationship with him. So I remember after I married Charlie, I used to stand in the bathroom and watch him shave because I'd never seen a man shave before. I was fascinated. I thought, oh, this is how you do it. So there's a lot I had to learn about what it was to be a couple because I had no clue whatsoever of what to do. So moving along, so I got married. 5 years later, we had our little son, Marshall, and Marshall was was a handful, but he was a sweetheart. And I always remember my aunt was always surprised at my life. First, she never could believe I'd get married. Then, when we bought a home right after our little son was born, she thought, who would have ever thought you would live in this lovely home in this neighborhood? She was just stunned. Then, when we had Marshall, she came in and looked at the baby and said, who would ever believe that you and Charlie could have a good looking baby? So, so she was just constantly.
Oh my God.
So at age 4, I mean, Marshall was hysterical. My aunt came to live with us when he was 4 years old. Well, this was a whole new chapter in our lives, believe me, because I felt a certain obligation to care for her. But the two of them were just a trip. And somehow he knew all the triggers. So one day she said to him, what do you think you want to be when you grow up? And there's a long pause, and then he looked at her. Now you have to realize my aunt was a teetotaler. She'd recite these long poems to me about the devil rum and all this kind of stuff. So Marshall said, Grandma, I thought about it a long time, and I decided I'm going to be an alcoholic. And so you're going to be
No.
what? And I said, oh, Marshall, come, we got to get this thing done back here. So I don't know where on earth, I mean, he didn't watch that television. Where on earth he ever came up with that word was so far beyond anything I could ever imagine. But I thought, wow, from the gifts, what words come out of the mouths of babes? It was the funniest thing. And they were always, having these quibbles. But the thing is, she was very, Victorian in her training, and she'd be very rigid as I was growing up. But as she got older, she became a very different person. And it was really hard for me because she wanted to be very affectionate, very loving, very caring, wanted to hug all the time. And I had been through so much with her meanness and anger and, you know, violence, really, that I, really found that it didn't matter Marshall a bit. He didn't have my history, so he was fine. But I remember one day, and this is what sent me into therapy, was she said, Marshall, if you do things like that, no one will ever love you. And that triggered something in my mind that I had heard years before, and I just went ballistic. I grabbed him and I said, the poor kid is thinking, what the heck is going on? Because he's very loved and very cared about. And I said, don't you ever think that in this life, somebody is not going to love you. You will always be loved no matter what. But I ended up in therapy after that, believe it or not, because I realized how much I had internalized the message, you are not lovable unless you do certain things. And it's always about sacrifice. Always has to be something sacrificial. So
what do you think it was that made you different, that you didn't buy into all that messaging because you didn't have anybody else around that was countering those things? What do you think it was that in your mind made you think that's not true?
I think some kids are born resilient. Some kids are, much more apt to take in everything they hear and see and believe. One of the things I credit with my being able to process all this in a positive way, ultimately, was a group called the Character Research Project out of Union College, Schenectady. And it was a program run through the church. And what Dr. Liggett had done was he combined religion with psychology. And so the parents, or parent, in this case my aunt, were required to attend classes. And we went every Sunday and we had specific lessons that we learned. For example, we were to put a happy face and a sad face on the refrigerator. And we were supposed to look at those and decide which one we wanted to be that day. So we had a sense of, it gave us a sense of control over our lives and what was happening. And we had a can-do convention, and we all made puppet socks. Mine looked more like a baseball bat, but it was a puppet that looked like a nurse because we were supposed to. And then I made a cake, and we all demonstrated what we could do. So there was a lot of focus. But the thing that impressed me most was every Sunday we would meet and discuss things, and there was somebody there who was writing down our every word. And for some reason, that that really got to me. That I was important enough that somebody would take the time to come once a week and listen to what I was saying and write it down. And sometimes I find myself deliberately talking kind of slowly so she got every word because I thought, wow, this is pretty amazing. While my aunt was pretty cold and Victorian-like, the teacher was very warm and kind. And so it was, for me, that gave me some tools to use in understanding what was going on. So eventually I came to realize, this woman that we go to see once a month, and she can be sometimes wild and crazy and sometimes calm and sometimes make me dolls and sometimes not speak to me, was what mental illness was. And I remember going to the library and looking up the word schizophrenia. So I was told I could never tell anybody ever about my mother or where she was at. So we would go once a month, and my aunt would always say I was sick or make up some excuse. So I went to the library and snuck through those old-fashioned card files till I found the word schizophrenia and pulled out this big book and went through it and read. Well, what I discovered was a lot of the things that schizophrenics do, normal people do. But what would get my aunt just so enraged is if she saw anything me doing that she thought reflected my mother. So for many years until I went into therapy, I rejected half of who I was because I couldn't be anything like my mother. If I sat in a rocking chair and rocked, oh, I couldn't do that because that was what my mother did. Or one of the reasons why she didn't like me looking in the mirror was she thought my mother developed mental illness, because she was vain and was attracted to her. And I think that's one of the reasons she told me I wasn't so good looking, because she kept telling me it's just so sad because your older sister is just so good looking, and it's just a shame you're not like her. And I thought, oh well, I'm born ugly, so I guess what can I do? And I remember in third grade consciously thinking, I may be ugly, but I don't have to be dumb. So I can learn new things. And I've read like crazy, read because I was left alone while my aunt was working. And so I read all kinds of books all the time. And so by the time I was in fourth or fifth grade, I was reading at a much higher level, all kinds of things. That's why I was able to even find the word schizophrenia. But I was constantly trying to discover what was going on in my world and what was going on with her, and getting more understanding of why we went to see this person. But it wasn't until high school that I finally told somebody, a guidance counselor, I think, about my experiences with my mother and how I'd been there. And I remember us in junior high talking about mental illness and what the mental hospitals were like and how horrible they were. And I would just slide down in my seat because I'm thinking, oh dear, I've been there. I go every month. I know so much. I could tell them so much, but I can't ever let anybody know. And actually, when I dated a boy in high school, he was next door, and the two landladies talked, and she said, well, I really think you need to think about dating Bonnie, because if it gets serious, you need to know that her mother was mentally ill. So probably shouldn't be dating her. So, word got around somehow or other. So that's one of these things you just accept.
I just think that it's so interesting that it was almost like there was just something inside you that just was not going to settle for what it was that was being told to you. And I think that's something that other people see and they think, how can I have a little bit of that? How could I adapt that mindset myself? I know mindset and stress management has been something that I think you said you had even taught about on the community college level. What are some techniques that you have for like managing, stress and your mentality when you're faced with challenges like this? What do you think some of those techniques are that you used?
When I reached a certain stage in my life, I realized how much I had repressed, and I needed to get some of this out. So I took a stress management course, and I learned some techniques that one can use. One of the things I learned in that whole process is that we have tapes constantly rotating around in our heads with negative messages we received as children about who we are and what we are. And that can create enormous amounts of stress for us. Um, the theory is you're either born perfect or you're born imperfect, and you can spend your life being a wreck because you're not perfect and trying to achieve perfection. So being who you are is absolutely critical to happiness and success. And it takes many forms. There are some specific things you can do that will ameliorate your stress. One thing that we're very aware of is breathing and the effects of breathing, taking deep breaths. You can do a counting breath where you breathe into a count of 5, hold for a count of 10, breathe out for, and of course, I don't want you gasping for breath. So you have to kind of modify that. You can do like 4 inhalations, 8 holds, 4 inhalations out. If you do that, anything you do that focuses totally on your body and get you out of your head is very effective in bringing down your stress level. One advantage of being old is you don't have all these pressures all the time. When you're growing up and you have a business and you have kids and you have a husband and you have all these activities that you're trying to do, you're constantly feeling the pressure of all that. And you need to, there's a B, B, C methods. And first is there any way to totally avoid the stress? Hansai said, avoid the alligators in your life. If there's people that you really can't stand, don't, spend a lot of time being around them because that's not healthy for you. So that's the avoidance. And there's a lot of ways to avoid things. The second thing is there any way to alter the circumstances to make them better, more agreeable? I frequently tell the story of a man who came to my class and he had just had a heart attack. And I said to him, what is the most stressful part of your week? And he said, every Sunday we go to see my mother several miles away in the car. I have 3 little boys. One little boy always threw up. My wife always ends up with migraine headaches. We get there, we have the meal, we go back home. My wife still has the headache. The little boy's still throwing up. And I said, how long have you been doing this? And he said, oh, maybe 10, 15 years. And I said, well, I want you to do something for me. I want you to go this week and tell her that you can't come anymore, that you need to do different arrangements of some kind. And so he said, well, I don't know how she's going to handle that. She still looks forward to our visits. But I said, for the sake of your health, you've got to do this. So he went and said, Mom, I'm sorry, but we just can't keep doing this. And she said, thank heavens, I am so sick of cooking for you people every single Sunday. She didn't want, everybody was doing things. And I see this over and over. When we get into patterns, we don't think about it and how it is. So they had all kinds of ideas of meeting in the middle and, getting fried chicken someplace. And there was a lot of different options that they never entertained because it was only this one alternative. Um, and then, so there's avoid, alter. The last A is that you have to accept, which is key to what I had to do when I was a child. But the B is become more resistant and change your perception. So by becoming more resistant, how do you do that? Through health, nutrition, diet, exercise, every way you can of taking care of yourself. And when I used to teach classes for young mothers, I'd say, you guys are just giving out, giving out, giving out, giving out all the time. and you've got to find time to put something in. Inevitably, when I look out at the crowd, every single mother would have tears in her eyes because they had not, you know, they're so committed to their children and their husbands and their work, and that they don't think about which, is very touching. Children take a lot out of you, a lot of patience, a lot of time, a lot of energy at time. So way back when, long ago, before everything was so sophisticated, I would tell the mothers to throw 100 pennies in the yard and go in the bathroom and just be by themselves for a while. By the time the kids got all the 100 pennies picked up, they would have had a little bit of time for themselves. Unfortunately, now everybody has these video games, and so kids are on them constantly. But I'm not sure that's such a good idea either. And the C is change your perception, and that is not always easy. But that involves a little bit of work and a little bit of time. But so often I find people try so hard to reach other people's expectations of who they are and what they are. And so by changing your perception, I remember one young lady coming to me and saying, I am just a wreck. And she said, my mother-in-law is coming this next week, and she comes and goes all over the house and looks at everything and complains about if there's dust on the top of the piano. And I said, well, you have to think about who owns that problem. I said, if she is so obsessed with that, hand her a rag while she's looking, she can dust. If you recognize that you don't have to own everybody else's problems, it makes a tremendous difference in how you perceive what's going on in your world. And I think you need to develop a sense of calmness and a sense of control over your own life and not let chaos overcome you. Because it's very easy, even more so than when I was younger, now to get overcome with chaos because it's coming at us from all directions. It's the internet, it's social media, it's people on the phone, it's people meeting in and there's all this anger and talk back and forth and rage and disgust, that's very, very challenging. So to find that middle ground within yourself is essentially very important, and just be able to step back and reflect. And if you can just imagine yourself as acting on a stage and what your actions are going to be based on, if you were on a stage watching that picture of yourself, there's always a part of you that's behind the camera looking out on what's happening. If you can access that part, you all of a sudden think, wow, that was just silly. Why on earth did I fret over that? Because and so you're able to back away from it. So I think that's a real key part of being able to change your perception and think of things differently makes a huge difference in how you handle the stress in your life.
So maybe just stopping and doing the breathing exercise for a second, just taking a moment, doing the breathing exercise, that always helps me as well. And then sort of viewing it as more of like a viewer, watching yourself as like the actor on the stage and taking a different, wider lens perspective and looking at it from a different angle. That is something that actually works for me as well. And so I think that's really good advice because it is easy to get overwhelmed with all the chaos of things going on. And that's part of mental strength and mental health is being able to call upon those techniques that you need in order to keep yourself centered and calm so that things feel manageable. Besides your mental health, what are some things that you do to keep yourself in good physical shape? And what would you tell the generations behind you really important that you've always practiced?
Well, I think one of the things that impressed me when I was very young, in my 20s, and I was teaching elementary school in the first grade, we had a teacher who developed colorectal cancer and ultimately died. And I talked to her just before she died, and she said, Bonnie, I never appreciated my health until I lost it. And so that impressed me in some way. So I've always tried to be health conscious on some level, not to the point of hopefully being neurotic, but I always tried to eat reasonably healthy. Uh, Back when I was in school, we didn't have teams that played sports, or I probably would have been on one. But, we went to gym and we did calisthenics and we pushed against the wall and we, did all this random stuff, played leapfrog, but it wasn't exactly what one would consider, being athletically challenged on any level. So when Marshall was young, I began running and jogging. And so I ran, and so I entered a 5K race. And at my age, lo and behold, I got a fourth place medal. Well, my son was so impressed that his mother won this medal. He's big time in sports all the time. But so that encouraged me. So I ran for quite a long time. And then I decided I was going to do a half marathon when I was 70. I mean, I realized I left out a whole bunch of stuff. Now that I'm 83, every decade is a little more challenging. So I walked and ran the marathon and unfortunately ended up having to have an operation because the insides of me kind of fell out during the process of this endless walking and running. So, so I thought, well, maybe this isn't such a good idea. So I decided.
That's good to know. I mean, I do jog myself. I don't like, maybe I need to rethink that practice.
Well, you can do a little bit of it, but I was quite surprised. But then at any rate, I did the I did the marathon, half marathon, not the full one, the half one, and felt very accomplished at that age. So I've always been interested, but I didn't, and I got into Y and dancing, which I absolutely loved, as you well know, Sarah, because I was teaching you some of my dance moves. Unfortunately, that class is ended. I think each generation you have to reinvent yourself in terms of how you're going to stay physically fit and healthy. And the thing you have to realize when you reach my age is anything can happen at any day, and any day, at any time, that will make a tremendous difference in what you're able to do physically. So you have to work to keep doing what you're doing as best you can, even though you're feeling tired or exhausted or like you don't have time or something else. And it's also good to remember you can fit in little bits of exercise during the day. I love to garden, so I'm out there. But when I'm gardening, I'm not getting in my 10,000 steps, heaven forbid. So I'm getting better and not getting so caught up in meeting particular number of steps or anything like that. Much more into trying to be physically active as I can. But I think you need to start early on, in 30s and 40s, and begin to do things and also watch your diet. And I happen to be a vegetarian. Don't advocate it for everybody. Lots of people like meat, and meat is good for them. Didn't happen to be good for me. So that's why I decided I do eat salmon. Everybody knows I eat salmon. Yes, every place we go, they're always serving us salmon, or at least me. So it's for me that felt right, um, and I'm not advocating it for everybody. It was just what was right for me. So physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, four wheels on the car. One of those is gone. The car doesn't run well. As we get older, the other thing that happens is our bodies don't work as well as we would like them to. We're like old cars, parts fall off and fall out. And, yeah, so you have to, you're constantly in some state of repair. Well, you don't have to talk about that. I mean, it just is what it is. When you're old, that's just what happens. So when you wake up in the morning, you're just glad you woke up. And so all these things you have to think about, balance. It's a constant thing of balancing your life. What's important? What doesn't matter? What's important? What doesn't matter? I used to tell my parents, when you get into these things with your kids, will it matter 5 years from now? If they decide to paint themselves purple and scream into the night, does it matter 5 years from now? No, it's just a stage they're going through. Other things do matter. What's your value system? What's important to you? You have to define that in your own head. What really matters to you? What makes a difference? Um, I've
How do
always
people find what their why or what their value system is? I mean, it's like sometimes maybe people don't feel completely content, or they feel like there's just something that, doesn't sit right with them. How do people find their value system? How did you find your value system?
I knew on some level that I wanted to help people. Helping people was very important to me. That was the thing that mattered. Now, how was I going to go about doing that? I loved the kids when I was teaching, but I was bogged down with all the administrative stuff, and I was just it was just very distressing to have to deal with all those other things that, that didn't really pertain. And one night, I spoke to the adults in the class about I can't remember what it was about now, some topic. And I thought, I really like this. Working with adults is really, I don't have to worry about discipline. I don't have to worry about when it's time to feed them the milk and crackers. I don't, all that stuff. And so that changed the trajectory because I decided after our son was born and got a little older, that's when I began working. I got my master's degree in education and psychology. And so I was tending to lean in that direction anyway. So I taught stress management for a while. And then I became a consultant and delved into some other personal growth things. Ultimately wrote a book about stress busters for kids, a parent's guide to helping and teacher's guide to helping kids cope with stress. So my mindset has always been, how can I help other people? Well, when I was in Washington, D.C., it took me 5 years, but I ultimately became um, is not only a stress management consultant, but I went all over Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia teaching classes in stress management, meeting with all kinds of groups and the CIA and the State Department. It was kind of an ego trip, to be honest with you. It really was, because
Yeah.
I would go into these rooms with all these doctors, and they'd be sitting around a table writing my every word down. And I'm thinking, really, really, this room was bigger than what the room I grew up in.
There's a theme in your life where people are writing all your words down. It's like,
um, yeah, and then I became the first woman president of the Vienna Optimist Club with all these men. And again, we had all these men around listening to me, and I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I like this. And then
that doesn't surprise me.
yeah, the Chamber of Commerce. And so I would go to give these lectures, and people would sit in the front row and they say, oh, yeah, I've heard of her. I heard she wrote a book, and I'm thinking, wow. And then I would go to these things, and there'd be all this parking lot full of cars, and I'd drive around, and some guy would pull in front of me and park. And I think, you idiot, I'm the one speaking. If you don't let me park, you're going to go in there and sit and wait. So I was just annoyed no end. So
He didn't know who you were, Bonnie.
I know
He did not know who you were.
I know it, but it was annoying. But I finally realized, anyway, I was enjoying this life. I loved going all over the place and doing the kinds of things I did. And it was exciting. And, I felt very much like I was doing great work, if you will. So then my husband ultimately lost his job. He was an actuary and everything was downsizing and it was just crazy. So then we moved to Tennessee. Well, every time I've moved, it's kind of been like dying. You reinvent yourself all over again. But this time I was totally confounded because I was used to, I guess, seeing myself in the light of this person who everybody knew in the town and, approached me and asked me questions and did all this kind of thing. And so all of a sudden there I am just there. And so I kept trying to search for big, meaningful things I could do. And one day I read a book by Ram Dass called How Can I Help? And it talked about, I didn't read the whole book actually. I just looked at that title and I thought, that's interesting. That's interesting. How can I help? And what I think I developed as a philosophy is at any given point in time in your life, you may not be able to do great things in big ways, but you can do small, meaningful things every day that may make a difference in somebody's life. So this has been my philosophy since I've been retired. So every day in the morning, I ask myself, after I say what I'm grateful for that day, my 4 or 5 things, who can I help today? Sometimes the answers appear. It may be as simple as sending a card to somebody you know who's sick or giving a call to somebody who you know who's down. But sometimes my experiences come to me. I've been with somebody who I feel needs me. But everything I do in my life is geared toward relating to the person that I'm with at that moment in time. So if you want to know about the histories of the people in Publix, just ask me. I'll tell you about the lady whose whose mother died, and she had to go to the funeral, but she really didn't feel bad about it because her mother didn't raise her, and they had a very difficult relationship. I mean, I can tell you about the two Turkish young men who put the groceries in my car from Walmart, and what they love about the food in their country, and how they call me Grandma Bonnie. And I always give them a hug after they put things in my car. So trying to be a loving presence in other people's lives is very important to me. And, that is what keeps me healthy and going, is that sense of purpose. And when I read about people that are our age, just miserable and unhappy, and one thing I have to say, and I think it's critical, is your health. If you lose your health in any way, that redefines who you are. But I'm hoping that each day that I can try and make a difference in somebody's life, either by you doing something as simple as smiling at them, that might make a difference. It might change how they see themselves or their lives. When I take the dog out, I wave to everybody in the cars that goes by. I'm sure some of them think, who is that nutty lady waving away at me? I don't know her. And yet, maybe it makes a difference. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
I think it does make a difference. It's never wrong to err on the side of kindness towards people. And I will say, you've made a big impact on me, and our friendship has been really valuable to me. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot right here that I didn't even know about you in the years that we've spent cutting your hair. And so it's fascinating to me. I think that when you come from a place of how can I help someone else, I think it is hard to be unhappy in certain ways. I know that everybody has a lot going on, and there are things, that are very difficult to be dealing with in people's lives. But, once I heard someone say, if somebody feels disconnected from others, or they're, lonely, or they're not happy, find a way to help somebody. If you can help somebody, you'll have a connection with someone, because of course somebody is going to want to connect with you if you're helping them, so you're going to get love back. You're going to get that feedback as well. And I love that part about you. You were talking about sending a card, and I do have to bring this up. Not only are you an author, an educator, a teacher, a mentor, a parent, all of these amazing things, you're also an artist. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up your beautiful Christmas cards that I look forward to every year. You send a Christmas card every year with your artwork on it. And the theme is Christmas in Happy Valley. Happy Valley is your imaginary town that you came up with. And your cards, I have a few of them here, are a different scene of Christmas in Happy Valley. And these are in no particular year order, because Bonnie, you have got to put the date, the year inside of these cards, so we know what year goes with what, because now they're all out of order. But these are beautiful. These are your own artwork, and I look forward to this Christmas card every year. And there's a message inside. This one is Donovan and Daisy enjoying Christmas in Happy Valley. I love that, with two little donkeys or mules, I'm not sure. So cute. Snowy scene. And then you have Christmas in the Hills of Happy Valley. Little kids ice skating there. I love it. And you have a message. May the peace and joy and love that descends on Happy Valley each Christmas descend on your home during the beautiful holiday season. Love, Bonnie and Charlie. There is another message, which I love. Care deeply, give freely, think kindly, act gently, and be at peace with the world. This is the spirit of Christmas. This is the spirit of love. So I just had to share these Christmas cards with everyone, because they are my favorite Christmas card that I get every year. And that in and of itself, your art and these Christmas cards that you send, even just cards that you would just send in general, but I look forward to the Christmas cards every year. It's because it's something that comes specifically from you, and to me that's an act of kindness, and I love those. Tell me a little bit about how you started with your artwork.
I'm not sure you want to hear this. for some odd reason.
Oh yeah, we've got all day.
So what happened was, so sometimes you're influenced in such strange ways. For some odd reason, I think it was probably in my early 50s, 60s, I got curious about mediums. People, that tell you what your life is going to be like or what's going to happen or what has happened or can get you in touch with people that have lived before or something. So I thought, some of my friends were telling me they'd been to this medium and I got really curious. So I went to the medium and she had a lot of interesting things to say. But one of the things she said was, "You have the hands of an artist." And I thought, I have the hands of an artist. Do I have the hands of an artist? I'm not sure I have the hands of an artist. What do the hands of the artist look like? So I thought, well, maybe I'll just dip into it a little bit and see. Well, I've never seen myself as an artist. I see myself as a hobbyist. I started taking lessons at the rec center and beginning to just do painting. But I kept trying to do landscapes and making a tree look like a tree. And, I was forcing myself into things that didn't feel right for me. Um, and one day I started to replicate a picture that I'd taken in Greece when I was visiting there. I was street seeing. And what I realized as I worked on that picture was how much I loved doing the little detail work, the little bushel baskets with the apples in them and that kind of thing. So I thought, I really like miniaturizing things, pictures. So I wanted to go in that direction. My teacher didn't always feel like it was in the direction I should be going. She kept trying to correct my trees because she kept saying that, the branches are too thick. Well, she was right, but they were my trees, and that was the way I just made my trees. So my trees have always been too thick, I guess. But that's okay. That's who I am. So basically, any artistic and anything you do with art, whether it's painting or drawing or music or whatever, I feel is very essential to your well-being. So I do what works for me. And some people probably think I'm very vain because I have some of the pictures you showed all up and down my hallway. And just going down that hallway and seeing those pictures gives me a sense of peace and calmness of being in a place where people are happy, people are at peace. So that's what I wanted to create. And so what was inside me came out in these little drawings, which is folk art. It isn't, I never would pretend to be an artist. I'm just a person who enjoys drawing what's inside of me and makes me feel at peace, really. Because I like
Yeah.
lots of these kids, skating around and going up and down the hills, and the people all, the man who some people thought looked like Santa Claus, delivering the Christmas tree, and this wife out waiting for him with her hands in the air. It's a nice, peaceful place to be. If you can't do it artistically, just visualize it in your mind. Think of a place where you can go or where you've been, where it feels supremely peaceful. Your body will react to that vision of whatever it is you
Yeah.
see. So if you go to that place and just use your all senses, your eyes, your ears, your hearing, your touch, your taste, everything in that place, your body thinks you're there essentially. So when I
Yeah.
imagine Happy Valley, I can see myself there. So that's the origins of those cards.
And I love that because when I look at Happy Valley, it reminds me of a little town where when I was little in New York called Spencerport. Looks like the village of Spencerport, and it was very much the same sort of vibe. This kind of reminds me of being a little kid, all the little neighborhood kids, and it was a very nostalgic feeling. And I think that's one of the things that draws me to Happy Valley, was because it is a happy place. And it's just fun to see these and kind of go there in your mind. Only one of the things that you have going on. You have another thing that you have started, which is called Food for Thought. And I want you to tell us about that, because giving a part of yourself and conceptualizing things and sharing it with others is so important. And Food for Thought is something that you conceptualized and you are in essence, sharing that with other people. You've created a group for people to become involved with what's going on in the world. And this group that you've established encourages other people to be engaged and do their homework and come to the table in discussion. So you've got connection with other people, you've got thoughts and ideas flowing. And so tell me a little bit about Food for Thought.
Okay, so a friend and I started this, and the reason we did was we realized that in many groups that we're in, the conversation usually is very light. It revolves around what paint should I paint my living room wall with, where do I get my nails done, and all that is part of the community, and I'm not criticizing that at all. It just, for the two of us, it lacked depth. And so we talked together about wanting to start a program, particularly because in our environment right now, there's so much friction and anger and hostility going on around political issues. And we felt it was important to address that and what was happening and how to address it in a successful way. So we always start out with a lunch together so we can get to know each other and talk. We try to limit it to 12, although sometimes it goes to 14. Um, my friend is an absolute gold mine of history. She's absolutely wonderful in remembering a lot of histories of countries all over the world. So she's been a huge resource in this program, as well as organizing where we're going to have it, what kind of foods we're going to have, what we're all going to bring. Great resource for all of that. So the two of us together decided that we would start this once a month, call it Food for Thought. And we've, fooled around a little bit at the beginning, just trying to find our way. But what has revolved out of that is this group of 12 women that meet every month. We pick a topic each month. Next month it's going to be on tariffs, but we've talked about everything from gun control to assisted suicide to all manner of things, poverty in the cities, endlessly. Um, what is evolved from all that is that we meet once a month. Each person speaks for 5 minutes about the topic uninterruptedly. I should back up a little bit and tell you the week before we meet, I send out from 5 to 8 questions about the topic. They then research that topic and they try very hard to get independent places to do their research from. In other words, they're not just going to a TV program or something to get their information. They're very careful to try and get balanced information about what we're talking about. Then they each have 5 minutes. I time them. When their time is up, we go to the next person. So it takes about a full hour to go around and each of them share. And at this group, I'm so impressed with them because they do such good research and they come in with charts and graphs and clearly they put a lot of time, effort, and thought into what they're saying, how they're saying it. After that, we have a general discussion. It's not the idea that we're going to attack one another. I should mention we have Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. But we listen to each other, and if we have questions, we try to talk to each other about the questions we have and the subject and in general. And we're always quite amazed at how close to the center all of us come. It isn't like we're way out in one direction or other. We all kind of have agreements about certain things and what we think should be done. I think there's a lot more of that in the country than we know, instead of us being so polarized. I would love to see this program replicated throughout the country. We have lots and lots of book clubs, but you don't hear many programs being started about dialoguing with one another in a peaceful setting about issues that matter. So this has become so valuable to me. It matters so much that and it's been so self-satisfying because sometimes I think we feel so helpless. I mean, all this chaos going on around us, and how do we deal with it? How do we focus on on what matters. And so and sometimes they share personal stories of how things have impacted their lives. It's a very deeply personal experience to hear some of them talk. And I always go away being very inspired and impressed, frankly, by the wisdom of the group, and how much thought they put into the topics each month. It's just so what we focus on is so important. I do often think about this. It's been a friend of mine was absolutely convinced that we were going to end up in some kind of a civil war or some kind of a war. And he spent endless dollars and money on guns and ammunition and food supplies and everything he would need to prepare to defend himself against some mythical enemy. And would talk to his friends endlessly and was, obsessed with it. Um, and he died of COVID. So I was thinking, he spent all these years of his life so focused on what might happen. Think of the good he could have done with the amount of money he spent on endless boxes of ammunition and endless guns, purchases of guns, which are not cheap, by the way, and huge supplies of food. And I found it very sad. I found it very sad because if you focus on what you can do to make the world better, it makes a very different feeling inside of you. He was working out of a place of fear and anxiety and worry and just a lot of tension and anger and all that was filling his body all the time. It's not a place to go if you want to feel peaceful. Then I found that very sad. So these folks are working in, possibly the things they might do in their lives to make a difference in some of these situations. So they try and speak up and speak out. Sometimes they want to speak up and speak out more than it's appropriate. When we first started the group, it kind of got a little
That's
dicey.
why there's rules.
So, but they are just terrific, just a great group of women.
Well, there's so much positivity and there's so much that comes out of creativity, whether it's creative outlets such as, artwork, but also in creative thinking and working to see what options are out there to make life better. It's a much more constructive and productive way of spending your time. And if somebody wanted to replicate that type of idea or group into their own community, how could somebody do that?
Basically, what the two of us did, we belonged to a group called the Newcomers Club of Williamson County. And so we just decided that we were going to offer this as an option. And we didn't know when we started out how this would turn out. We had no clue.
How did you find your members?
Well, Williamson County Newcomers Club invites anybody in our community or beyond who are interested to come once a month to a program. But we also have multiple activities going on, all kinds of games, canasta, mahjong, bridge, everything, euchre, you name it. And so we decided to offer this as an activity for the Newcomers Club, which we helped because we have a group of close to 200 members, and we knew we would appeal to some. Now, we didn't know when we started what we were going to get because it was, a pretty politically charged atmosphere. But I'm just bowled away every time we meet by these people and their thinking and the effort they put into the subject matter and the thoughtfulness. It's just amazing. So what I would suggest is any group, if you wanted to start a group, to develop a group of maybe neighbors, maybe just neighbors, invite them to come in and have a discussion about something. My friend always wants her to be around food, and I think she may be right, because if you eat, it kind of brings people together a little bit more, and it's more relaxing than just launching into these subjects that are pretty deep some of the time.
I mean, it's amazing that these emotionally charged subjects, this group has stayed so consistently productive, respectful. It's been going on for several years now. I know I said it was new. It's not. You've had this, what, a couple of years at least.
We were trying to figure out the other day. It was in the 2.5, or maybe 3 years we've done it.
Yeah, and it's just taken off and been fantastic. And it's been a huge success. And I feel that there are people who would love to be able to have discussions like this without the fear of there being some sort of big altercation, because politics and subjects like these that you're talking about can spark big feelings in people, and it could get out of hand, but you have guidelines and rules in place so that everything stays, everybody's voice is heard, and that the discussion stays respectful and productive.
Right.
But you and I think, could probably talk all day. So to keep it reined in a little bit, we're going to go on to our last and final segment, which is called Cut It or Keep It. So Cut It or Keep It is a segment that we do at the end of each podcast, which is a take on basically my decision as a hairstylist each day when I see my clients to cut this hair or to keep it. Is the hair too dead, not worth keeping? We cut it off, or do we treat it and keep it? So I'm going to ask Bonnie a list of concepts and see what she has to say about them. Would she cut them? Would she keep them? So first off, we haven't talked much about it, but we've touched on it a little bit. Cut it or keep it? Social media.
Cut it. Cut
it. Would you like to expand on that?
Well,
just a little bit.
There's either or questions. There's some parts of social media that are valuable, and as long as it's kept within bounds, it can be effective. But when it becomes overdone and people are obsessed, and the challenges with young people, with the bullying on social media, these kinds of things, it's gone way overboard. We've gotten kids now. The thing that dismays me, even in the neighborhood, is when I talk to kids or try to engage with them walking down, they don't even look at me. They may say hi, but they're looking in another direction. There's no eye contact. They don't know how to relate to people, and they really struggle. So there's been a lot of that. That's why I had to hesitate. But if it was a total choice, I'd say, well, let's just cut it and go back to the time where we all just interacted personally. So I can see some advantages. So I didn't, that's a long answer to a short question. But when you look at those two, I lean on the side of cutting it.
All right. So education has changed a lot over the years. And so I'm going to ask you, cut it or keep it, digital learning.
Again, I think we have to be balanced. I'm worried that I think a certain amount of it may be quite effective, but if it's overdone, I think it, again, creates problems very similar to social media. We need interaction with one another as human beings. It's very essential. So if a child is just sitting in front of a computer all day, that's not a healthy way to learn and grow and become a productive person. So that's
agreed.
Mm-hmm.
So keep it, cut it or keep it.
It's so hard to be so. I tend to be in the middle, so I tend to say, cut it.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. So you have experience in education, you have experience with mental health issues, and I know that you talked about the importance of going to therapy and how important that was to you. One of the things that I spoke with my actual therapist about on one of our podcast episodes was the fact that it's kind of too bad that we don't incorporate mental health education into the mainstream school system. So cut it or keep it. Would you have mental health in education as a standard?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
agreed. Keep it. If we had it, we'd keep it.
Okay. I do have a story, but we may not have time.
Go ahead and tell the story. We got all day.
When I taught kindergarten,
not really all day, but tell the story.
Well, when I taught kindergarten, we had a group called Magic Circle. And we encouraged kids when they came in the morning to say things that they liked about each other and to talk about feelings and emotions and those kinds of things. Now, this was a little bitty class of kindergartners, and they were so responsive to that. I was very pleased with what was going on with that. The social worker initiated it in the classroom, and it was doing very well. One of the mothers went to the school board and said that I was teaching witchcraft. I have no idea because I guess it was called Magic Circle. She thought it was
Oh,
something to do with witchcraft. She never said in on it. So the board nixed the whole thing. It was just the end of it. So, this is kind of you go forward and go back, go forward and go back, and so yeah, it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky
yeah,
teaching mental health.
yeah.
Some parents get very threatened.
If we could just teach children how some of the tools that you talk about, just to be able to manage, mental health a little bit better with all of the bullying and things so forth that you were talking about as well. Cut it or keep it, gentle parenting. This is the current parenting trend where parents are extremely gentle in their upbringing of their children. What
So
do you say?
definitely cut it. The opposite of gentle is really harsh, and I don't approve of that either. But I think children, one, love boundaries. They love to know that there are limits. They need to realize that there are consequences for behavior. I don't think you have to be violent, but I think you do have to have consequences, and that you do have to be calm and assertive and consistent in telling them what's expected. You can talk about family values, what you value in your family. It takes a lot of talking and a lot of patience to raise children. And it's easier to just say, do what I say, or just do whatever you want, honey. I'm fine with that. Neither thing works. An example of when my little boy was 4, he was supposed to go to a party and he didn't want to wear his shoes. And I told him he had to wear his shoes. So he took his shoes and threw them in the bushes. And I said, well, we just have to wait until you get your shoes out of the bushes and put them on before we can go to the party. Well, he held out long enough that he ended up not being able to go to the party. Natural consequences. I didn't yell, scream, holler, go berserk. I just made a statement. So that's very different than just do what you want, honey. If you want to go to the party barefoot, fine with me. It doesn't matter. Yada, yada, yada. So there's a point in gentle parenting where you can get in a lot of trouble because you have to begin training when these little kids are 1, 2, 3 years old. You can't suddenly wait until they're 7 and say, oh, wait a minute, why is this kid totally out of control? And I don't think they're comfortable with it. I really don't. They want guidance. There's a whole difference between authoritarian parenting where you're just saying, do what I say and do it now and end of discussion, and being an active parent, which is what I approve, which is active parenting, which is giving them values, giving them ideas. We spent a lot of time doing volunteer activities when my son was young. So I got the feeling there are people that don't have what we have, which made him very thoughtful about people. And to this day, when he outgrows something, he goes out on the street and finds a homeless person and gives it to them.
Mm,
So you were asking earlier, how do you find values? Well, you pass them down from one generation to
right.
the next. What matters to you is
Yeah.
going to matter to your child.
Love what you say about natural consequences and active parenting rather than gentle parenting. All right, next, government funding for community support systems. I know you've been involved volunteering a lot for different community enrichment programs. You do a lot of that. What about government funding for these types of systems and programs?
I think they're absolutely essential. I think that's what makes. I've often said that I remember a psychologist uh, class that I took at Michigan State University. One of her comments that stuck with me forever is when a country or a civilization begins to fail, they cease caring for the very young and the very old. And many of these government programs fund programs for the very young and the very old. And if we destroy those, we're literally taking our country apart because uh, help is needed. Help is needed on both ends. We need to help our children. We need to help our elderly people, much older than I am, clearly. so, so no, I
You're
think
still so young.
I think it's absolutely essential that we fund these programs because without them, what we do is we become so into ourselves and into money. And, there's a lot of this going on today where it's all about the money all the time. And I think we have to look at what our value system is and what matters. So are we willing to pay taxes to take care of our own people? Are we willing to pay taxes to take care of our children and our babies? And no, I would definitely keep it.
And kind of on the back of that, mandatory service learning, which is the idea that requires students to participate in community services as a part of their education.
Definitely keep it. Again, I think it's very healthy to do that kind of a thing. This summer, I'm starting a reading under the tree in the backyard, a little bit. And I have these little kids come and we read a story and talk about it and eat a snack. And so I encourage the older children to come to be mentors. And I feel like they're part of the process of helping. And so I think it's really essential that we raise children to have this sense of being mentors and helpers and these kinds of things.
Yeah, I think it's important to teach people from an early age to make that something that's just a part of life. Mm-hmm. Our last one that you said you didn't want to talk about, but I got to ask you, what about teen slang words? You told me, you said, I'll talk about anything but teen slang words. So I imagine you're going to cut it.
The other day you were doing something with one of your coworkers and asking them,
yes,
and I thought, well, gee, I do agree with that. But then I thought, oh dear, if she starts asking me about teen slang, I will be totally lost. I do not. So I was very
well, you know what? We're going to do a part 2 coming up and she's going to ask me. So I was asking her. Now she's going to ask me about Gen X words and concepts, which I'm sure I will not do as well. So that's coming up.
I think that's fine for teens to have their own language. Yeah, it's just fine. I don't have a problem with that in the world. I don't have any need for it.
You just didn't want me to ask you what they were. Well, I was just picking at you. I love joking with you. I love the laughs that we have when you always come into the salon. I love hearing your stories, everything from the groups that you have going to your enormous Easter egg hunt that you have every year for the neighborhood children, to the reading library that you have, and all of the many countless things that you're involved in. I just think that it is so inspiring. I love hearing about it. I knew that it would be interesting to the listener. And so I'm so glad I had a chance to have you on and that we've had an opportunity to spend this time together. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for coming on and spending this time with me. I can't wait to see you in the salon next. Your hair looks good. Your hair still looks good. You'll probably be due for a trim in, so many weeks, but
I made a special effort to comb her just for you.
Oh my goodness.
I think it's fine. Yeah, life can be fun if you let it be. You can choose the life you want to live. And I think that I've loved our conversation today. It's been very fun. I appreciate it. Podcasts are fun. What can I say?
So fun. So fun. Well, we'll have to do it again. Thank you so much for coming on. I will see you soon.
Okay.
And thank you all for joining us here on the Lessons from Your Hairstylist podcast. Take care. I will see you on the next one.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Lessons from Your Hairstylist. I hope you found inspiration and actionable insights to embrace your unique beauty and elevate your life. Remember, it's all about taking small steps towards a happier, healthier you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who might benefit from it. Together, let's continue unlocking the secrets to living beautifully fulfilled. Until our next appointment, keep your thoughts on your visions, your self-talk kind, and remember to keep your heart open so you don't miss any opportunities waiting for you out there. I'll see you on the next one.